Hey guys, welcome to 3.5. It's the quadratic formula. Today our objective is what is a quadratic formula and how do I use the quadratic formula to find the roots or solution of a quadratic equation. So before we even get into that, let's really review what is the general form of a quadratic equation. We know that's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Our quadratic formula is
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
There you go, that's our quadratic formula. Now, looking at our quadratic formula, minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. No, guys, you don't need to memorize this. This is on the Regents reference sheet. Now, these letters, these variable actually comes from our formula. So you will be given something in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c, and you will be asked to find, using the quadratic formula, the roots. So you must get the equation equal to 0 before you can determine the a, b, and the c. We use a quadratic formula when something cannot be factored. However, it also works for factorable quadratic equations as well, meaning this formula works for everything. Let's see how this example works. First one, I check. Before you can find a, b, and c, the equation must equal to 0. So is it equal to 0 in this case? Check. Then I'm going to say, what's my a, what's my b, and what's my c? Notice my b is -8. The -8 follows. My quadratic formula, again, this is given to you on the Regents. And I would just want to plug in everything. It's negative b, and in this case my b is -8, so I kept that negative outside, and then in parentheses my minus b. Then you're going to type what is under the radical exactly as written on your calculator. Just what's under the radical side, not the square root side. Then you should have gotten 12. This becomes 8. And then I want to simplify the radical. So in this case, they ask you this in the simplest radical form. So remember, simplify your radical is 4 times 3 is 12. Square root of 4 is 2. And then I keep my radical 3. So my roots are 8 plus or minus 2, square root of 3. Notice my denominator is 2 and I can divide everything out. So then my final answer will be x is equal to the 4 plus or minus square root of 3. And those are my roots. Example 2, it says solve the quadratic equation using the quadratic formula and round your answer to the nearest tenth. Is my equation equal to 0? Yes. My a, b, and c. Take my quadratic formula and I substitute the value. Again, how did I get this 28? Type everything that's under the radical sign, meaning do not include the radical sign. This becomes 12 plus or minus square root of 28 divided by 2. I can, since we are solving to the nearest tenth, we don't need to simplify the radical. So remember, this says it's 12 plus or minus, so I can branch this off. This becomes 12 plus square root of 28 over 2, or 12 minus square root of 28 over 2. Be careful when you're typing this in your calculator. Remember, I suggest that you do control division, enter everything on top and everything on the bottom. When you do this, you should get 8.64, and if I round that to the tenth, up here is a tenth, meaning 1 decimal place, it will be 8.6. And same goes for the other side. It becomes 3.35 to the nearest tenth, 3.4. And those are my roots. Solve the quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula and leave your answer in simplest radical form. It's equal to 0, so that's perfect. 3, 0, -5, my A, B, and C. Use my quadratic formula and substitute this. Once I have that, I get x is equal to 0 plus or minus square root of 60. Remember, plug everything under your radical sign into the calculator. Now I need to simplify the radical because they asked me for simplest radical form. 60 is simplified, meaning two numbers, when I multiply it, I get 60. One of them have to be a perfect square. This becomes 4 times 15. Square root of 4 I know is 2, and I keep my radical 15. This becomes plus or minus 2 square root of 15. And remember, you will always get two answers. So since I can't divide by the GCF, it says divide the denominator if you can, but in this case I can't. I will be left with plus or minus square root of 15 over 3. How did I get that? Because 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. So this is my final answer. I don't have to separate it since it's just 1. It becomes x is equal to plus or minus square root of 15 over 3, and those are my roots. Example 4, is this in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0? Nope. So I want to make this equal to that form. So what I'm going to do is minus 10 on both sides, and I'm left with x squared minus 10x plus 8 equals 0. And I'm looking for nearest tenth. So what's my a, what's my b, and what's my c? There you go, my quadratic formula. I substitute my values, my a, b, and c. Then I'm left with x is equal to 10 plus or minus the square root of 68 over 2. And remember, this is where I separated because I want the nearest 10. So I have 10 plus square root of 68 over 2, or 10 minus the square root of 68 over 2. I simplify this out. I am left with 9.1, and I want to round this to the nearest tenth. That means I am going to get 9.1. If I was to work this out again, I will get 10 minus the square root of 68 divided that by 2. I get 0.87, and I round that up to 0.9. And those are going to be my roots. Solve the quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula and round to the nearest tenth. Why am I doing so much example? Because the quadratic formula always works. Even when you're doing those x method and you can't figure out those two numbers, quadratic formula works always. So the first thing, is this in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0? No, it's not. So I am going to first distribute, and then I'm going to take away 1 on both sides, and I'm getting it 3x squared minus 6x minus 1 equals 0. Now it looks like that. What's my a, what's my b, and what's my c, guys? Take my quadratic formula, and I'm going to substitute everything in. I am left with 6 plus or minus square root of 48 divided by 6. And again, I want this to be in the nearest tenth. So I am going to separate these out. What is 6 plus square root of 48 divided by 6 is 2.15. Rounded to the nearest tenth is 2.2. And then I have my other choice, which is 6 minus square root of 48 over 6. That becomes negative 0.15, which is rounded to negative 0.2. And those are my two roots of my equation. Alright guys, so you know what to do. Work on those practice problems and see me when you're ready.